morning, boys and girls. Do you ever feel sleepy in the morning? Like you just can't wake up and get moving? Even if you think you slept pretty well the night before, sometimes you just still feel sleepy. Well, I've got a story today that's going to be about sleep. I think you'll like it. And I've got another really good one too after that I think you'll like too, about a bear. Not a teddy bear, but close enough, I think. I think we're going to have some good stories and songs today, and I can't wait to get started. So, everyone get your yawns and your stretches out of your system. If you yawn a little bit more, I promise I won't be upset about that. We all have those mornings. Clap your hands if you love stories. Clap your hands, I know you do. I'm so glad that we could be together. Glad to share a story time with you. This is the story of The Princess and the Pea. It was written by a man named Hans Christian Andersen a long time ago in a country called Denmark. It's kind of a silly story in some parts, if you want my honest opinion, but it's been around for a very long time, and it's kind of funny too. So, once upon a time, there was a prince. And all this prince really wanted was to find a real princess who he could marry and take for his queen when he became king. And he traveled all over the world looking for a real princess. And you wouldn't think it would be that hard to find, would you? You just go to one castle or another and ask if there are any princesses around, but apparently it was harder than you would think, because though he met lots and lots of young ladies who claimed to be princesses, they weren't really princesses, or at least not as far as he was concerned. Something was wrong with one or the other. He was just not satisfied. And so he came home, and he was sad, because he would have liked very much to have found a real princess that he could marry. Well, one evening, as he and his mother, the queen, were sitting in their castle, there came a big storm. There was thunder and lightning, and rain was just pouring down as if someone had dumped the ocean on top of the world. It was hard to see when suddenly there came a knock at the castle door. And when the door was opened, they found a young lady standing there who said, "I'm a princess. Can you please help me?" This princess didn't look very much like a princess. If you want to know the truth about it, her hair was plastered down because it had been rained on. Her dress was soaked and hanging off of her. And when she took off her shoes and held them up, water ran straight out of the shoes. She was a mess. But she still claimed that she was a real princess, and she needed somewhere to stay for the night so she could get out of the rain. Well, the queen didn't believe, or she wasn't sure whether she should believe the princess's claims about whether she was a real princess. But she had a plan. She called some of the maid servants with her, and they went into the guest room where they were going to let the princess sleep. And she said, "I want you to take all of the mattresses and blankets and everything off of the bed." And so they did. And then she took a pea, one single pea, not a cooked one, not a cooked mushy one, but a hard one, one that hadn't been cooked yet. And she put it in the middle of the bed. And she said, "Now put all of the mattresses and everything back on top of that." And the maids were very confused. They said, "Your Majesty, why are we doing that?" And she said, "A real princess is one who's been raised in luxury her entire life. She's been cared for. She's been treated like a gem, and she will know." And so she went back out, and they spoke, and they said good night. And the princess went into the guest room and went to sleep. Well, the next morning, the prince, his mother, and the princess sat down at the breakfast table, where they were served a fine royal breakfast. And the queen said, "My dear princess, how did you sleep last night?" And the princess said, "I hate to complain. I was raised to be very polite, but I must confess I slept awfully. It was dreadful. I should have been able to sleep quite well, as tired as I was, but there was something in the bed. Heaven knows what it was, but it felt as if I was lying on top of a boulder. I must have bruises all over my back. I'll be black and blue. It's terrible. I'm sorry to complain. But the queen was not at all sorry, because she knew that they had found a real princess. Nobody but a real princess could be that sensitive. What do you think about that? But in the world where they lived, that was a good thing, to be so sensitive that you could feel a pea through layers and layers of mattresses. And the prince was thrilled that he had finally found a real princess. And they let her stay, and he got to know each other, and they fell in love. And eventually they married, and he had a fine queen for his wife. And as Mr. Hans Christian Andersen, the person who wrote the story, says, that is a true story. We're going to do a finger play about putting a baby down for a nap. Can you show me your finger? It's not a finger anymore, it's a baby. Here is a baby ready for her nap. Lay her down on her mother's lap. Cover her up so she won't make a peep. Then rock her gently until she's asleep. Let's do that one more time. Here is a baby ready for her nap. Lay her down on her mother's lap. Cover her up so she won't make a peep. Then rock her gently till she goes to sleep. Now we're going to hear the story of Snow White and Rose Red. Before I start telling you the story, I should let you know this Snow White is not the same young lady as the one who stayed in the woods with the 7 dwarfs. This is an entirely different young lady named Snow White. Have you ever been somewhere maybe where someone else has the same first name as you? Maybe there are 2 Michaelas or 2 Susies. There were 2 Snow Whites, I suppose. Maybe there were more. I don't know. This Snow White and her sister, Rose Red, were named by their mother for the rose bushes that grew outside of her house. She had white roses and red roses, and when she had these 2 little girls, she thought that they looked sort of like the roses in front of the house, so she named them after them, Snow White and Rose Red. And they were loving, wonderful children, sweet and gentle and good to everyone. And they didn't have much money living in the little cottage in the woods, but they didn't care. They didn't need money to be happy. They had each other, and they had enough, and that was fine. Well, one evening, they were all sitting together cozily by the fire, telling stories to each other, when there came a knock at the door. And the mother looked up and said, "Rose Red, open the door. It must be some traveler searching for help." You see, it was snowing and cold outside that night. And when she opened the door, Rose Red gasped, because standing outside the doorway was not a man or a woman. It was a bear, a great big giant black bear. And she started to scream, and Snow White went and hid behind the chair. But the bear said, "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I'm frozen half to death." And the mother said, "Poor bear, quick, quick, come in and lie down by the fire." Because you see, she was a good woman, and she didn't want anyone ever to be unhappy or hurt. And so she called Snow White and Rose Red over to her, and she told them that the bear wouldn't hurt them as long as they were kind to him. And so the bear laid down by the fire, and the mother said, "Children, knock the snow off of him. Help him to feel better." And so they brushed the snow off with a broom, and he stretched out and became warm. And he was indeed a very kind, friendly bear. And as they sat and talked for a while, they became quickly close friends. They became happy and comfortable with each other, and they continued to tell stories and played games, and just became the best of friends. And every evening, the bear would come back and lie by the fire, and they would get to know each other better and better until they couldn't remember what it was like to not have the bear as their friend. But when springtime came, the bear came and said that he wouldn't be able to be back for a while. And Snow White said, "Well, where are you going, dear bear?" And he said, "I have to go into the woods. There's something that I have to find. I've been hunting it for a while, and I have to keep continuing my hunt." And Snow White and Rose Red were very sad to say goodbye to their friend. But as they were going out, they were waving goodbye. The bear was pushing his way through the door, which was a tough thing to do for a giant bear in a small doorway. His fur caught on a hook by the door, and Snow White noticed that as the fur tore away, there was something shiny underneath. It glinted like gold. But before she could say anything, the bear was gone off into the woods. Time passed, and the family went on. And one day, the mother sent her daughters into the woods to gather sticks for the fire. And they found a big tree lying on its side in the middle of the woods. And they heard shouting and grumbling coming from the other side of it. And when they looked over it, there was a dwarf who was angry and stomping his foot. And he was stuck. You see, he had a long beard, and the beard had gotten stuck in a crack in the tree. And he looked up at them with his angry, angry eyes, and he said, "Why are you just standing there? Come and help me." He was not a very nice dwarf, but the girls had been raised to be kind to everyone, and so they did everything they could to try to get him free. They pushed and they pulled, but there was nothing they could do until finally Snow White took a pair of scissors that she had from her mother and cut a small bit off the bottom of the dwarf's beard so that he could get out. And he was angry. He said, "You clumsy creatures, you've ruined my beard." And he swung a bag that he had next to him on the ground that seemed to be full of gold over his shoulder, and then he was gone. A while after that, the two sisters were down by the river looking for fish, and they heard the same dwarf yelling and shouting. And they went to where they heard him shouting, and he was leaning half over the water, being pulled by a giant fish into the river. And he called, he said, "Help me, help me." The fish had hold of his beard again. And the little girls tried to pull him back. They weren't such little girls, they were older. They did everything they could, but there was nothing they could do. They cut off more of the beard. Oh, the dwarf was so angry. He said, "You've damaged my beard again." And he picked up another bag that he had on the side of the river. It seemed to be full of pearls, and he slung it over his shoulder and stomped away. One day after that, the little girls were on their way into town. I keep saying little girls. They were young ladies by this point. They were growing up, becoming adults. And on the way, they heard a terrific scream, and they looked up, and an eagle was flying through the air, carrying the dwarf by his beard. Oh, it was awful. The dwarf screamed down, "Help me! Help me!" And the girls jumped, and they grabbed hold of his clothing, and they managed to pull him free of the eagle. And he said, "Look what you've done!" His coat had gotten torn in the struggle. He said, "You've damaged my wonderful coat, you clumsy, horrible little things!" And he picked up a sack that seemed to be full of fancy and shiny jewels. Stomped away. Well, they were used to it at this point. They knew that he was going to be grumbly no matter what happened. So they made their way along their journey. On their way home, they happened to hear mumbling and talking, and they passed the dwarf again. This time, though, he was not in any danger. He was sitting on the ground, stacking stacks of gold coins and counting his jewels. And he looked up and saw them. "What are you staring at, making ugly faces? I should chase you." But before he could get up and swing a stick at them, they heard an awful roar, and from behind them charged the big black bear. And he stormed past them, and with one massive paw, knocked the dwarf sideways, and he fell to the ground, out cold. The girls were shocked, but before they could say a word, the bear's great fur coat fell away onto the ground. And underneath all of that fur was a young man, handsome, dressed in shiny gold clothing, rich. And the young man looked and said, "Don't be afraid, Snow White and Rose Red. I'm a king's son. I was enchanted by this wicked dwarf here who turned me into a bear. And so I've been looking for him, hunting until I could find him and beat him so that I could be returned to who I am." And so he guided them back home. And one day, many years later, Snow White actually found herself married to that prince. And Rose Red married his brother, and they were happy ever after. Can you count how many friends I have here with me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to sing 5 in a bed. Okay? Here we go. There were 5 in the bed, and the little one said, "Roll over, roll over." So they all rolled over, and one fell out. There were 4 in the bed, and the little one said, "Roll over, roll over." So they all rolled over, and one fell out. There were 3 in the bed, and the little one said, "Roll over, roll over." So they all rolled over, and one fell out. Oh no! There were 2 in the bed, and the little one said, "Roll over, roll over." So they all rolled over, and one fell out. How many are left now? There was 1 in the bed, and the little one said, "I'm tired, I'm tired." So he rolled over and went to sleep. Well, I hope you enjoyed our stories and songs today. Little Panda Bear says that he's sorry for knocking everyone out of bed, but that's okay. I think they'll all forgive him. I can't wait to see you guys next week. I am looking forward to sharing some more stories and songs with you. But in the meantime, that's all that we can do today. So let me see you get a big stretch and a big yawn. Rub your eyes if you need to. And reach for the ceiling. And touch the floor. Stand up again. Let's do some more. Touch your head. And now your knees. Up to your shoulders. Like this, you see. Reach for the ceiling. And touch the floor. That's all there is. There isn't any more. You gonna say bye-bye? Bye-bye.